everybody, welcome to The Story. In case you're wondering, by the way, this is my costume. I'm going as a journalist in 2021 who is well rested and has had enough sleep. I know, not terribly convincing. But seriously, on this Halloween Eve, we have a packed show, including the latest on Portland's push to open safe rest villages throughout the city. Spoiler, they found another site. Spoiler again, it has another problem. And to follow up on last night's big story about that live autopsy conducted in front of an audience at a Portland hotel. If you missed it, it's up at kgw.com right now. You had a ton of questions, including where did that traveling expo get the body? And what happens when you donate your remains to science? This story left a lot of people wondering a lot of things. So we're bringing back Kyle for some answers, because again, this is the show that turns your questions and your comments into content. So email thestory@kgw.com or use that hashtag #TheStoryKGW. Our team is watching for your comments as we speak. With that said, let's get started. Okay, so tonight's big story is about homelessness and our housing crisis, not in Portland, but hours away in a small community along Oregon's coast. In fact, this headline caught our eye today. Oregon coastal city limits number of meals churches can feed homeless. Shout out to OPB on that one. So here's the deal. You know, we talk a lot about Portland's housing crisis, but this story tonight and that one from OPB is proof that this issue is way bigger than any single solitary city. It is a regional problem. It is a West Coast problem. And a lot of experts believe homelessness is rising or will soon rise in most cities nationwide, including smaller ones. And sometimes when that happens, you find communities caught off guard by this problem taking measures like this. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's back up a little bit. These photos are a good scene setter. These come from staff at St. Timothy's Episcopal Church in Brookings, Oregon. Brookings is near the California-Oregon border, so we're talking southern coast. This church has fed their city's poor for decades. And when COVID hit, they saw the need skyrocket. So, along with a handful of other local churches, they teamed up to offer one free meal every day. Each church took different days of the week. People bounced from church to church, day to day, but at least they got to eat. Well, Father Bernie Lindley, who you'll hear from in a minute, says eventually, other churches started to struggle. They couldn't keep up with the demand. People got scared to be around strangers during the pandemic, you name it. So as other churches dropped out, he and St. Timothy's picked up the slack. Until eventually, and this is key, that one little church, St. Timothy's, started offering one meal a day for anywhere between 4 and 6 days per week, up to 6 days per week. This happened around lunchtime. Lindley says anywhere from 50 to 70 people showed up. And soon, sweet little St. Timothy's basically just thought, they're doing a great service. Someone has to feed the homeless. Their neighbors had a very different take. In fact, here's video of neighbors testifying to the Brookings City Council back in June.
I'm here today because I don't feel safe in my house. This is a public health concern. It's a safety concern for the public. It's not. We're not trying to solve the nation's crisis of homelessness here in Brookings, Oregon.
But I've had things stolen from my backyard. I had to put fences up. It's the drug use is what makes it uneasy. They're selling drugs down there, they're trading drugs, whatever they're doing, but I literally have to go on a walk every night just to make sure, no one's going to be coming up into my property.
Some of the things that I've listened to in this meeting, Love That Neighbor was one of the things that I thought most interesting, especially since I took a petition around the neighborhood of St. Timothy's Church, and about 90% of them were against what's going on at St. Timothy's Church. So I don't know how that falls into play with Love Thy Neighbor.
Okay, so we do want to be clear. Other neighbors spoke to the council that day in favor of the church's efforts. We chose the sound bites that we chose just now because the city council this week apparently took these concerns very seriously. And on Tuesday, the city council voted unanimously to pass a new ordinance in Brookings. Now, churches in that city can only offer food to homeless people 2 days per week, 2 days per church. Pick your days. The legal argument was that St. Timothy's was was feeding people so much, it was basically a restaurant. And under city code, restaurants cannot operate in residential zones. So the city sees this ordinance as a compromise. You can feed the homeless, you can do it, just 2 days per week. 2. Instead of St. Timothy's recent routine of 4 days per week, they'd come down a little bit from 6. So now back to Father Bernie Lindley of St. Timothy's, because as you can imagine, he, like those neighbors, has some thoughts.
How do you tell a church that they can't feed people? Isn't that what churches are supposed to do? In our diocese, in the Episcopal Diocese of Oregon, our churches feed people. That's instrumental in the way that we serve God and serve God's people.
So here's the deal. Father Lindley says his church is doing everything it can to work with neighbors and with the city, who, by the way, we've reached out to. Neighbors have turned us down for interviews. They're a little nervous with how big this has become. And as far as the city is concerned, we left a message at City Hall, which turns out is closed on Fridays. And we got in touch with the city manager, but we haven't been able to interview anyone behind these decisions yet. If that changes, we'll absolutely let you know. But in the meantime, Father Lindley is polite, but he's defiant. He's not cutting his service back to 2 days a week, he says. If the city wants to fine him or arrest him, he says go for it. He told me he's prepared to sue. His reason? The homeless population in Brookings, he says, is growing. More than 150 people by his estimation. And his small town, like a lot of American small towns, is not prepared for this crisis coming their way from larger cities, especially like San Francisco, Seattle, and Portland.
We're seeing like the overflow, I guess. People are coming into the rural areas now. And one of the concerns that people share, people in the community, they say, well, you're going to turn Brookings into another Portland, and there's going to be all these people living alongside the freeway in tents, and it's going to be a disaster. And unfortunately, that is the consequence of the high cost of housing, all the instability that was created by the pandemic, and the fact that we have very little in the way of mental health services or addiction services. Where inpatient treatment centers are not easy to come by.
We'll keep our eye on Brookings, but in the meantime, now let's bring it back home, because you might be frustrated or have opinions going either way on the situation in Brookings. And again, reach out to us. But again, those neighbors are not talking, at least right now. Here in Portland, though, homeowners are speaking up, and they're demanding the city do more. First, some context. Earlier this week, we profiled the impact of our housing crisis along Northeast Marine Drive. I met 2 viewers out there. One was worried about crime and the danger for people walking, biking, and living there. The second viewer was worried about environmental impacts near Marine Drive. So now we're hearing from people who live in homes near those camps, and they say those concerns are totally legit, and they've been asking the city for help. The response, they say? Crickets. Actually, they point out crickets might make more noise, but whatever, I'm not a scientist. Specifically, we're talking about the East Columbia neighborhood. They're bordered by Northeast Marine Drive, 33rd Drive, and Delta Park. And here is what neighbors say they're dealing with.
I've gone running just a half a mile from here, and there are syringes and shady figures, and I mean, there's always a car being torn apart. I can't run along the slough anymore by myself.
I had my catalytic converter stolen from in front of my house a couple months ago.
It's just getting worse and worse and worse. They clean up part of Marine Drive, and the next day there's a big fire there. I saw someone the other day that they actually had a fire in their motor home. Wood fire.
So those neighbors say they've seen their neighborhood and the area around it deteriorating for years, and they've asked the city for help but gotten no response. They say, they think at least, that's due in part to the fact that they're not located, in one of the city's richer areas.
And see if we can get someone's attention, if someone will talk to us. But nobody's even talking to us, so we don't know what's going on. We have no idea. That I know this may not be the most affluent neighborhood in Portland. We're surrounded by FedEx and truck parking lots, And frankly, I just don't think that we have the attention because of where we are.
So the people living here say they want the mayor and city commissioners to come out and visit them and see how they can figure out some solutions. And they want those solutions now, not in a few months or a few years.
Do you feel like you're getting the runaround?
No, I'm not getting the runaround because no one's even called to give me the runaround. We're not being heard, as far as I can tell.
So again, we asked the city about this area for our piece earlier this week, and they say this part of town has a big mix of property owners between the city, Metro, ODOT, the Port of Portland, private owners, the list goes on. And for that reason, the city says the camps on these patches of land are legally really tough to clear. As you can imagine, that answer does little, if anything, to satisfy the people we interviewed. Okay, so now let's talk about what the city is doing about the homeless crisis, or at least what they're trying to do. You might have heard that Portland has a plan to open 6 homeless villages. They're calling them Safe Rest Villages by the end of the year, and they've got about 2 months to go until that deadline. And at this point, the process is kind of struggling a little bit. The city started with a list of 70 potential sites, all those sites owned by the city. And now we're told all 70 are off the table. No longer options. 2 other locations are in the earliest stages of construction. Those appear to be happening. Now we've heard of a 3rd site that could have a bit of a problem with radon. Pat Doris has more.
While it was quiet in the late morning Friday, give it time. The Portland School District property where the old Whitaker Middle School stood next to Fernhill Park is popular and busy. It's also the latest piece of property the city is looking at for a new, small, homeless community. And it's a surprise to many.
I also think that there hasn't been a lot of community engagement from the city yet.
Amy Constam is a Portland School Board member, one of 9 who will have a final say on the plan. She said the city only recently made its proposal, and now the school board needs to talk with the neighbors and those who use the area.
We haven't done any community engagement, so we need to do our due diligence.
The city's idea joins 2 other proposals for the property, which has sat vacant for 14 years. One comes from supporters of the Albina Sports Complex, which would feature both indoor and outdoor track spaces, baseball fields, a cross-country path, and more. The other plan comes from Portland school employees who want to create a regional athletic center here. Whitaker Middle School was torn down in part because of radon gas below the building in the ground. It's unclear if that problem still exists. Both Constam and fellow board member Julia Brim Edwards acknowledge there is a problem with homelessness in the city.
We do feel a responsibility to really run this down and see if it might be possible. But that said, just a lot of work to do, a lot of people to talk to before we're anywhere close to making a decision.
But Brim Edwards said it's not clear yet that the Whitaker property should be part of the solution.
The concept is for the short term is something that the city should consider. Again, but in my role as a school board member that has a fiduciary responsibility both to taxpayers and also to our students to use our property and our assets in support of our mission, that's what the lens I have to look at this project through.
The Portland School Board expects to meet in mid-November to talk about this homeless proposal. They also expect that by then their staff will have a recommendation on which way they should go. In Northeast Portland, Pat Doris, KGW News.
You might have noticed we clearly have a bit of a theme here tonight. Let's wrap up this talk about our housing crisis with a story of solutions. Specifically tonight, a solution for college students struggling with homelessness. Here's Christelle Kumwe.
5.
Got it?
Yep.
After a long day at work,
And I can take the bars too. I work 3 days a week. This is cubby number 5.
and navigating both online and in-person classes at Portland State University.
Do homework at one of the places on campus.
Stevie Stevenson just wants a place to rest.
Okay, there. I have 3 pillows and 2 fluffy blankets.
That hasn't always been the case.
hop from place to place or stay with friends or sleep here or there.
Stevie was without a permanent place to live after leaving an unsafe situation with a roommate before fall term at PSU.
When I lost my home, I thought I was going to have to give that up. I thought, oh, I got to withdraw. Like, I don't have any, how can I go to school when I don't have a place to stay?
But with the help of Portland State, she found a place to stay.
It's awesome. And I've made my little spot cozy. This is my little spot. Very cozy and warm.
A pod at the Landing, a homeless shelter for PSU students. The school refers students to the temporary shelter, which officially opened last month.
Yeah, it really does help me focus on my daily life, because then I know that when I come back, I can take a shower, put on my PJs, lock up my stuff, and settle.
The shelter is run out of the First United Methodist Church of Portland in Southwest. The church initially raised the funds to start the shelter a few blocks from the PSU campus, and the community donated supplies to build the space.
These were made by church members many years ago and originally were meant to house families, so they're quite spacious.
There are 8 pods or rooms, each with a table, a cot, and a place for belongings. The shelter also has showers, Wi-Fi, laundry, and a pantry.
It's not a long-term solution, but it serves an immediate need for people who are experiencing sometimes very, very difficult situations. Hey, Stevie! Ah, yeah, you made it.
So far, 5 students use the free spots at the Landing each night, and more likely will need assistance. A PSU report from the fall of 2019 showed about 16% of students experienced homelessness within a year, while more than 44%, like Stevie, faced housing insecurity.
I just really hope that people get to know that this is here, because it's nice, it's quiet, it's peaceful.
Stevie hopes her stay at the pod will be a path to stable housing as she works through programs at PSU to find an affordable solution.
So I just want like a 1-bedroom, me and my dog and my partner and me going to work and going to school.
Christelle Kumwe,
like that's
KGW News.
That's optimum.
Our big story last night got a lot of you talking. A man's autopsy conducted for a live audience at a traveling expo.
You know, hosting an event in a pay-per-view manner for a body donor who likely didn't consent to this is completely immoral and unethical.
So what happens when a person's body is donated, and how can their body be used? We'll get into it when the story continues. Keep sending in those questions and those comments to the story at kgw.com. We've already got a ton tied to Portland's housing crisis, not surprising, and we're checking those messages as always during the show. By the way, if you weren't with us last night, you missed a rather odd story. I'll just say that. An event organizer charged hundreds of dollars for attendees to watch an autopsy of a human corpse, a real human corpse. It was part of an Oddities and Curiosities Expo, a traveling expo, and tickets started at $250. VIP seats went for $500. The Multnomah County medical examiner who you just saw tried to stop the event. She thought it was immoral and unethical, especially since the corpse was donated to science. The event organizer defended his expo as educational. Now, we heard from several of you, including Aileen, who asked, where did the bodies come from? So that question in mind, let's bring back Kyle Aboshi. So Kyle, what's the answer?
Well, according to the event organizer, the cadaver came from a company called MedEd Labs. It's a Las Vegas-based for-profit company that accepts donations of human bodies for what they say is medical and surgical research, education, and training. What's unclear is if MedEd Labs or the donor's next of kin knew how this cadaver would be used, specifically on display at the Oddities and Curiosities Expo, or what type of consent may have been given.
Okay, so that in mind, and I've talked to you about this before, I kind of have a question because, you know, multiple people in my family, for instance, have donated their remains to science, and I know they're not alone. A lot of people think about doing this at least. So for anyone considering it for themselves or talking about it with a loved one, like, what can we tell people about how this works?
Sure. And there are a variety of programs for anatomical or whole body donations. Some are connected to hospitals or research labs, others linked to for-profit companies. Now, policies differ among donation facilities, so it really is important to research and understand the procedures and really the fine print, which we say time and time again. But generally speaking, in exchange for the donation of the whole body to medical or scientific research, surviving family members receive their loved ones' cremated remains and avoid the cost of burial. Organ donation, on the other hand, is something completely different. That refers to the donation of organs after death that can be transplanted to another living person.
All right, good info. Kyla Boshi, thank you. All that very normal info in mind. Let's turn now, or next I should say, to spooky season. It's in full swing this weekend for obvious reasons. So tonight we're going to check out a Halloween display in Vancouver that draws hundreds of people each night. When the story continues. Welcome back. Let's talk Hey Help really quickly. Our campaign this week is focused on urban gleaners. They distribute thousands of pounds of free food directly to kids and their families, frankly, anyone who needs it. They do this year round, and they also deliver to local schools. To donate, just hold your phone's camera up to that QR code. It'll take you to a donation page. You can also just skip that part and go to kgw.com/heyhelp. I'm sure I don't need to tell you, we are a few days out from Halloween now. We have a gross amount of candy in the newsroom, and it will be my dinner. And our team here at KGW has been having fun scoping out the spookiest spots in town. One of them that we got a lot of emails about in Vancouver has been stopping hundreds of neighbors in their tracks. Here's a look, courtesy of KGW's chief photographer, Nick Bieber.
I was kind of the odd kid that never trick-or-treated, but I would like be in my parents' front yard, you know, just hiding, waiting to scare the trick-or-treaters. Jim Maines, and this is my 37th year decorating.
Jim Maines have a lot of scary skeletons.
We'll start planning the decorations in July, and then we'll start setting up the second week of September.
Oh, I see a ghost!
We light everything up, as you see right now, about October 3rd. And then that just gives, especially again with COVID, we really wanted to give families something fun to do, to kind of have that Halloween experience again.
I'm starting to get scared.
It's just been amazing how many people have been coming by every night. I mean, we've been averaging probably 500 plus people a night just coming by and driving or watching.
Oh, look at the one on the swing.
There's a skeleton riding a car out there.
And we drive past here every day because the kids go to school down the street. So it's nice to be able to see it at night.
Going to school in the morning, we're just like, whoa. Everybody just stares over here. Look, see right there.
They come out, they bring their kids out. Everyone's just having a really good time. And I just really feel like being a part of that experience and seeing our community really embrace all the holiday, you know, all these upcoming holidays with Christmas and Halloween, I think is just kind of a really cool experience.
It's like the Clark Griswold of Halloween. That's fantastic. All right, keep sending in your questions and your comments to the story at kgw.com. Find us on social media. We're going to finish the show right after this. All right, guys, pick up your phone, follow us on Twitter at The Story KGW, or email thestory@kgw.com. That does it for us. Let's bring in Ashley Korslund now for the news at 6:30. Hey, Ashley.
Maggie, hi. Tonight we're looking at Portland's growing gun violence problem. The city has set a new record for homicides in a year. Next, we'll hear from one of the family members of one of the victims about the life tragically cut short. The news at 6:30 starts now.